proximity emerged.
Proximity.
Why proximity?
Proximity.
Because these are issues that I believe passionately that opera is a form of art and a form of entertainment that has something important to say to us here now. I'm Anthony Freud, and I'm the General Director, President, and CEO of Lyric Opera of Chicago. Obviously, with heritage operas, there is a great tradition of presenting some of the great masterpieces from the last 400 years. But alongside the presentation of those masterpieces, I think it's really important for a company like Lyric Opera of Chicago to demonstrate its commitment to relevance, to demonstrate its commitment to telling important, topical, sometimes political stories, to demonstrate its commitment to telling more diverse stories and engaging diverse storytellers to tell those stories, for us to have a really serious ongoing commitment to the commissioning and producing of brand new work. Yuval Sharon is a brilliant director, more than a director. He's an artistic theatrical imaginer. He develops installations, ideas, philosophies, themes, and he's been an incredibly important part of the development of the idea of proximity and its component parts. It was Yuval who came up with the brilliant and unexpected idea of shuffling the three pieces, not performing them sequentially, the way traditionally one would expect a trio of short pieces to be performed, but to actually have a scene from one followed by a scene from the other, and allow the very contrasting styles and subject matters to intensify through its relationship with the companion piece.
I'm Yuval Sharon. I'm the director of Proximity. I've worked closely with all three of the composers and librettists, and shaped how this all comes together as one evening under the title of Proximity. You know, with all of the creators, we kept talking about a number of different philosophical traditions that are about the interconnectivity of us with each other.
Proximity is a project that has been being dreamt about, being planned, being prepared probably for 4 years now. When I first had a conversation with Renee Fleming, who's the curator of Proximity, we acknowledged immediately that what we wanted to do was to tell stories in an authentic way that truly resonated with Chicago of today.
Very early on, you know, Renee Fleming and Anthony came to me with this idea of 3 separate projects, hoping that I could somehow find a through line for them, you know, that could really weave them all together. Caroline and Jocelyn go more intimate, and they go towards just in a way, the simplest human unit of a relationship between two people that feels strained and alienated because of technology. So that the technological apparatuses in our life, what they do, of course, in some ways they connect us, but in many ways they also alienate us from each other. And I think that Caroline and Jocelyn's piece reflect that so beautifully, this notion of really two people. They're almost anonymous to us, but they live in and among the city, they move through the city, and they are nevertheless always at kind of feel at a distance from each other. So how technology has changed our own sense of a relationship between just two people is in a way the simplest kind of social unit.
I think one of the surprising but also really enjoyable things about being a part of this is serving a larger picture, knowing that Yuval and the producers and staff have a vision of the whole piece, and I get to support that by making part of it. It's also really exciting to be in a room with a lot of different people with different roles. Also to make music on this scale. I love music very much, and it's exciting to make it this way.
Caroline Shaw is one of the most exciting young American composers with a hugely distinguished international career and reputation. It became clear that the subject of loneliness and isolation in a world dominated by technology and social media was something that fascinated her, that she was excited to write about, to compose about.
I self-perform as a vocalist almost all of the time with a microphone, either with a group called Roomful of Teeth or with my solo work with So Percussion. That's one of the big differences between what you hear on the opera stage with bel canto singing versus something more in a pop aesthetic with the microphone. And so as I've written this piece, I'm also very aware of what the voice can do acoustically, the sort of different spaces of resonance, how words can read, how text can read. For the two main soloists, I've written generally things that are more in the sort of bel canto wheelhouse, but for the 8 singers in the ensemble, I have a few different techniques. There's a little bit of vocal fry, which is, I think of it as the sound of kind of chaos going into order, where you and they go into these different chords. I'm also an instrumentalist, so I find there's a lot of expression that can come from using the voice as an instrument with just the color of the vowel or the consonant, humming, all the different things that we do with our voice when we speak, and sort of extending those into music. I wanted to make a piece that addresses several things that we deal with on a daily basis. Loneliness is certainly one of them, isolation, sort of interfacing with technology, which is everywhere around us. Also the sense of being kind of alone in a crowd, which is, there's a scene on a train where anyone who's taken the subway, you know what it feels like to be, you're sort of surrounded by all these people and different thoughts, and yet you're within yourself. So trying to make something that has that kind of intimacy within the vast expanse of being in public. The very first scene is called The Phone. It's these 2 characters trying to have a conversation, and I know many of us have had conversations either on the phone or on Zoom or on FaceTime, and it glitches out and you're missing something, but it's kind of the most important thing, and there's deep frustration there. There's a sense of loss. There are 2 characters which I've called A and B, and part of that is because as I was writing this, I found myself not wanting to be very specific about who they are, but to make it feels more universal and yet also closer to my own experience. So I did not specify anything about age or gender, and I really like it that way.
We wanted to embrace the challenge of our art form, opera, dealing with some of the most important, concerning, pressing issues confronting all of us alive today.
The notion of, for example, gun violence being something that is happening on our own streets, and something that a lot of the audience that comes to lyric opera might think is happening in a distant place, far, far away. I think we want to indicate to everyone that this is an incredibly proximate problem, and that it's something that requires all of our engagement, and it is all of our responsibility.
Daniel Bernard Roumain, DBR, and Anna Devere Smith, we introduced to each other. I believe they'd never met before they started working on this project. Anna Devere Smith is one of the most distinguished writers and actors of our time, and her specialty is to create works of drama out of first-hand interviews that she conducts with a whole range of different subjects. DBR is a composer who has an immensely distinguished track record, both as a creative artist and as an activist. And out of those conversations arose the idea of creating a piece about gun violence. And we worked in close collaboration with an amazing organization called Chicago Cred, because Anna needed to be able to speak to people whose lives were directly affected by gun violence. And Chicago Cred enabled us to introduce Anna to a number of extraordinary individuals who had extraordinary stories to tell. And those stories form the libretto and the heart of this wonderful piece.
I'm Paul Robinson, and I'm the Deputy Head of Programs at Chicago Cred. Chicago Cred is a gun violence prevention organization that was founded by former U.S. Secretary of Education Arne Duncan back in 2016. And our mission is to create a transformative reduction in Chicago gun violence. And our approach is pretty simple. We believe if you want to stop shootings, you need to work with shooters. So our goal and our aim is to engage with those that are at the highest risk in our city to shoot or be shot, and to provide them with a whole range of supportive services to help them increase their safety, increase their stability, get connected to the legal economy, and help us lead the city towards a safer future.
How does proximity affect the objective of Chicago Cred?
I think the word proximity really encapsulates the work that we do at Chicago Cred. Cred is a high-touch program. The participants who are enrolled in Cred are coming to our sites 5 days a week, about 20 hours a week, over 18 months. So this is not a short-term intervention, this is a long-term relationship. And every participant that comes into our program has a tutor, a therapist, a case manager, an outreach worker, a job coach, a whole host of supportive adults that are really journeying with them. We always say we're getting into the passenger seat of their lives. They're driving the car, but we're in the passenger seat, we're helping give directions. And so to do this work well, you have to be in proximity to people. It's all about relationships. Programs don't change people, relationships do. And so that's really our motto and a foundation for the work we do every day. So probably about 5 or 6 years ago, as a team, we were invited to go see a show called Notes from the Field, which was a one-woman show put on by Anna DeVere Smith, where she had gone around the country interviewing incarcerated individuals, and she put those together to tell their story. And we were just all blown away by her storytelling, by the authenticity of the piece. And so we're really excited. A couple of years later, got a call, and I was able to get connected with Anna. And she said she wanted to interview folks who work for Chicago Cred, who are connected to our work, and that she wanted to tell their story as well. And so that's how things began. And it was funny because she said to me, I really want to get connected to people with big personalities and incredible stories. And I said, well, you're in luck, because that describes pretty much everyone I work with at Chicago Cred. And so it was really easy to connect with people who fit that profile. And so she interviewed a whole bunch of people on our team, and as I understand it, narrowed it down to some of the most compelling stories and used those as a foundation to start developing the story for proximity.
Proximity is one of those rare occasions where an audience can come into a safe space where there will be ideas and imagination on the stage. There will be opportunity for an audience to hear and see things that they may have never seen before. I'm Daniel Bernard Romain, and I'm the composer for The Walkers. Working with Anna DeVere Smith has been a true magical moment in my career and in my life. I consider her a mentor and a teacher, in addition to being an internationally renowned actor and playwright. I think our work started with her words. Her words are very musical. And in so many ways as a composer, my job is to extract the music from the words. Anna conducted interviews with real people here in Chicago, and also created a world of imagined characters, also here in Chicago.
Anna DeVere Smith, I'm the librettist for the opera Proximity. I'm looking for the people who have something that they were screaming from a mountaintop. People say about my work, I give people voice, people have voice. And so to me, the main thing is that I see myself as an audience for people who have something they're just dying to say. I had actually interviewed Arnie Duncan when he was Secretary of Education for a play that I wrote about the school-to-prison pipeline. And it was Renee Fleming, having seen that play, who came to me with the idea of writing a libretto about gun violence in Chicago. And because of COVID, I didn't have the opportunity to sort of just come to Chicago and scout around to find people, which is normally how I work. And luckily, Arnie was very helpful and introduced me to his staff at Chicago Cred and here, very importantly, at the Lyric. Normally I go to the place where I'm doing the interviews, but because of COVID, we couldn't do that.
These issues and concerns and fears are not somehow far away from us, that in fact they are incredibly close to us, even if we choose to ignore them, and even if we choose to keep them at arm's length.
The music is expressing these relationships, particularly in terms of how are we as an American society looking at our relationship to guns and the Second Amendment. What is coming into our homes and into our theaters and into our communities, and what are we going to do about it? It's holding a mirror up to what are the role and responsibilities of the living in a time of terror and trauma.
I think the music is beautiful. Chicago Cred, I mean, they're dedicated to trying to get guns out of the hands of young people. You know, Arnie decided that whereas some people might say, well, the way to avoid youth violence is to work on early childhood education. He decided, I'm going to work with the shooters. That's a very progressive idea. And not only am I going to work with the shooters, if people say, oh, Arnie, this is great, you're giving people a second chance, he's coming with the idea of, no. For some of these people, there has been no chance. This is the first chance.
I think the music reflects our own response and responsibility in terms of how do we tell the story of an American culture consumed with guns and gun warfare. How do we tell the story of young people in middle America and urban America in our cities who have a love affair with the mythology of guns, right? In some ways, a gun is as American as apple pie, right? Artists have led the way, and we do this by unabashedly talking about the things that are painful, that are hurtful, but that are real. And we do this as antidote. We do this as trying to find new ways to combat old, sometimes very violent ideas.
In many ways, I started with a Martin Luther King Jr. quote talking about the web of mutuality that we're all involved in. And that felt to me like, in a way, the core of what this piece is about, is that we are all connected with each other, and we must embrace that and look for ways in which we can connect more deeply with each other. The same with climate change. I don't think John's piece is specific about climate change, and there's no kind of activism around climate change in his work. It's a poetic exploration of where the Earth is right now. Nevertheless, where the Earth is hurting is also an issue that is proximate to each and every human that is walking the planet.
The threat to the environment, climate change, the danger of the natural world disintegrating is something that preoccupies all of us who have any thought about the world around us and its future. John Luther Adams is a really important American composer who has spent decades dealing with the threat to nature, the threat to the environment, in a whole range of ways. And when we approached him about participating in proximity, he immediately focused on a poem by a close friend of his, the late, great Alaskan poet John Haynes. And he wanted to develop this poem into a piece that, in an extraordinarily beautiful slightly abstract, intensely poetic way, deals with this enormous issue of the threat to the environment.
I see myself as a composer whose work is deeply grounded in the earth. Because, look, landscape is the culture that contains all human cultures. Everything that we are, everything that we imagine, everything that we think, everything that we create, everything that we imagine we create, ultimately derives from this miraculous, mysterious, ancient world that we inhabit. The pandemic, in a strange way, the pandemic forced me to face my own hypocrisy. Here I am, known as the eco-composer, right? And for all these years, I've been flying here and there around the world. And the pandemic was sort of an engraved invitation for me to practice what I preach, to stay home in my studio doing the solitary work of composing music. And, you know, from now on, I think I'm only going to travel when my presence is truly necessary. Look, everything we do now affects future generations. It's our responsibility to think about this in every action that we take in our daily lives. So Cynthia and I are coming to hear Proximity by train.
None of us are anything other than in close proximity to all the issues that this piece is asking us and our audiences to think about.
I don't have a particular issue in mind, if you will. To the extent that I do, it's the all-encompassing issue that threatens our very survival as human animals, which is climate change, which includes everything: social injustice, inequities, the looming refugee crises that appear to be ahead of us with climate change and desertification and sea level rise. These are all ultimately part of this larger issue of human-caused warming of planet Earth. We're all Earth people. We're all citizens of this planet, which, you know, I don't know about your generation or maybe your kids, but I know that for me and for most of us who are alive now, this is the only home we will ever know. We damn well better wake up and take care of one another and this house that we live in.
And for me, John Luther Adams' piece goes up another power of 10 to 100, zooming way out and thinking about the Earth and the condition of the Earth and our role in caretakers of the Earth. So thinking that all three of those scales actually are all completely interwoven with each other and interrelated, as opposed to, and this is why I really thought it was important to make sure these pieces are not presented in isolation with each other, that we don't just do one piece and then stop, and then do the next piece and stop, and then do the next piece and stop. Because I think that lets the audience a little bit off the hook and lets them say, okay, I'm really connected to Caroline's piece. That really speaks to my own understanding of a relationship between someone that I love, and brings some illumination there. But maybe when it comes to Daniel and Anna's piece, maybe some people would think, okay, now is the piece that I can allow some distance to, because I don't necessarily, that's not my everyday lived experience. So to interweave them means they're all interconnected. And what is happening for the humans depicted in Daniel and Anna's piece completely intersect and rely on the what happens in Caroline and Jocelyn's piece and John's piece as well.
You know, I'm two men. One man is a lifelong activist. He's a man who's deeply concerned about the urgent issues of the world that we all share. The other man is the artist. His primary responsibility is to the daily practice of the art. And that man's belief is that the art must always come first. If the music doesn't move you, if it doesn't touch you in some way as music, then anything else that the artist might say, titles, program notes, interviews like this one, ultimately mean nothing.
Because these are issues that are global, that are national, that are local, that are individual, and that are deeply personal. And the title, I hope, demonstrates the extent to which all three of these issues are issues that affect us all, personally, individually, societally, collectively, socially, as a city, as a nation, as a community of human beings.
This project is one of my favorite projects. One of my favorite projects right now in my life, and one of my favorite projects I've ever done ever. And that's because of the dynamic collaboration that I've been able to have with Yuval and with DBR. They're both obviously exceptional artists, but I've also grown as a human being to be in their presence. So I just want to have to congratulate them, and I'll always be grateful for Arnie for stepping forward and allowing me to come into his community, though virtually.
We've got to reinvent and rediscover community. So it seems to me that a work like Proximity, which is so much about community, is some kind of model for a role that opera might play now, at this moment, and in decades to come.
I think I always hope with any kind of art that it maybe breaks you out of the normal routines and patterns and ways of thinking. It says, what if maybe there's someone's story that I didn't know about before? There's a conversation that's happening around me that I wasn't aware of, or I was, that I haven't really engaged with. And being sensitive to it and being active in changing what one sees needs to be changed.
I think that proximity to me means, what is my relationship to the person next to me, to my own feelings, and to my own emotions? And what is my responsibility to protect the person next to me and my own feelings and my own emotions?
My own cultural background as a Jewish person, I think a lot of Martin Buber, who talks a lot about the relationship between two individuals being a microcosm for the relationship between an individual and a higher power. And so this is a strain in so many traditions and a lot of different philosophical traditions. The fact that we see it repeat, you see it in Buddhism just as much as you see it in Christianity, as much as you see it in Islam, the recognition of each other's humanity, how important that is to convey this message now, when we've been so apart, where we're at this frayed moment in our social fabric, and where we look for the ways and the reminders of how we are ultimately closer to each other than we are apart.
My hope is that in engaging through art, in this case through opera, in this specific case through proximity, with these three very important subjects, we are able both to understand them more profoundly, to comprehend what options we have to contribute to solutions, and to work together as communities, as a city, as a nation, as a world, to really ensure that our lives and the lives of our descendants are protected, improved, made more humane by our grappling with these issues, not ignoring them.